Greetings, everyone. This is Rock and Roll Spot Connection with the Weekly Comic Book Roundup for last week. Well, last week's non-DC titles. Went through that in the last video, so yeah. Anyway, there are also other reasons why this roundup is a little late, and why the roundup for this past week will also be a little late, but we can get into that later. So we've covered this week's, last week's X-Men books, as well as Alien and Magic the Gathering, and so now it's on to this week, or last week's Spider-Man books, as well as last week's Avengers book. Kicking things off, we've got Amazing Spider-Man number 78. Continuing Spider-Man Beyond. Where we left off, while Peter Parker was fighting for his life in a hospital, Ben Reilly, as Spider-Man, employed by the Beyond Corporation, was dealing with being Spider-Man, and ran afoul of Morbius, who took a bite out of him. So the issue picks up where we left off, with Spider-Man having been bitten by Morbius and fighting Morbius. The bite got through his armor, and it's not doing it's rough. But he fights back, and then he leads Morbius on a bit of a chase back to Beyond Tower, and basically triggers the security system, or convinces Morbius to chase him, trigger the security system, but the security system attacks Morbius and actually blasts off one of his arms. So Morbius leaves, and Spider-Man passes out. He's promptly taken to be taken care. He's probably taken away to be administered an antidote to Morbius's form of vampirism. Of course, while this is going on, one of the higher-ups asks, do we have to give him the antidote? Could we see what happens if we don't? But it's decided that no, they'll give him the antidote after all. At the hospital, Black Cat goes to visit Peter, wanting him to come back to her. But and her being there, he moves, pointing at MJ coming in. Which Black Cat notices, and MJ sees this, and let's just say Black Cat and MJ do not have the best of relationships. But then Felicia understands that, MJ's Peter's girl. He chose to be. He's trying to be with her. So, but MJ points out that since he's been going through this, that's the first time that they've seen him move. So she can stay, but she does need to change out of her Black Cat costume. Just in case someone sees. Elsewhere, Spider-Man's Beyond employed trainers, Misty Knight and Colleen Wing, are dealing with Morbius. And Beyond Corp drones keeping an eye on them. But they take down Morbius using the spinneret. And oops, the drone gets knocked out by Monica Rambeau, a former Beyond employee. Well, employee of a Beyond subsidiary. The highest anti-terrorism effort. In fact, she was a member of the highest anti-terrorism efforts strike team, Next Wave. And it turns out that Colleen and Misty are in fact working with Monica to find out just what's going on. Meanwhile, Ben is enjoying a night off with his girlfriend. But after they go to the movie, in which Ben slept through, snorted, even snoring a little. They are apparently being stalked by none other than Kraven the Hunter, and that is where the issue ends. Our next Spider-Man issue will not be picking that up directly, but as it is issue 78 BEY. So, I think for most of it, it's going to focus much more on the Colleen Wing, Misty Knight, and Monica Rambeau story. But yeah, Spider-Man Beyond has so far been really fun. So yeah, I'm digging it. I really like just the brief moment with Felicia and MJ as well. That was really great, especially Felicia or MJ at least kind of showing that MJ understands that yes, even though she there is things between Peter and MJ, or between Peter and Felicia, are complicated. She does at least recognize that Felicia does care about him, and so yeah, and Peter cares about her. Maybe not the same way he cares about MJ, but still, there's caring involved. It was a good moment. And I'm looking forward to seeing it possibly play out. Moving on to our next book, we've got Miles Morales Spider-Man number 32. Where we left off, after a battle with with Taskmaster, Miles was beaten, and Taskmaster had left with his target, Starling. So we open with a flashback to when Starling first got her wingsuit from her grandfather, the Vulture. And she talked about how free it felt to fly. And apparently she took to it like a fish to water. And, but yeah. She's trussed up in Taskmaster's hideout. And Taskmaster tells her that he was hired to bring her in alive. His client was very particular. But Miles is trying to catch up to her, but he's hurt. An EMT sees him. There's a couple of EMTs see him, get him taken care of, and he calls Ironheart to ask for some help. Turns out that the champions have biometric data on Starling, so that makes it easier to track. That way they can figure out where she's at. So we also find out that Starling's suit has some strength augmentations, which Taskmaster doesn't know about. But Miles finds them. They are on a boat, and they're on a barge in the bay. He fights Taskmaster. Turns out though that Taskmaster's on a clock. He's got to get Starling to his client by a certain time, otherwise he doesn't get paid. But Starling gets free, puts her wings back on, helps Miles with Taskmaster. However, during the fight, alarm goes off. Taskmaster's phone alarm goes off. Contract's null. He explains that the contract was very specific: delivery by midnight, or null and void. Taskmaster's phone runs constant, hyper-precise ETA recalculations. So at that point, there's no way for him to make it to the client with all the time wasted there. And, he explains he's not going to tell them but they ask who hired him, and he's not going to tell them. He's got scruples. He may be a money-grubbing pig, but he's got, principles. Also, he's managed to build wings into his cloak, and he flies off in a rig similar to Starling and Vulture's. As he does so, a flying stretch SUV arrives to serve Miles with a cease and desist order on behalf of the Beyond Corporation. That plot thread will be picked up, it says in Amazing Spider-Man number 81, and that is where the issue ends. Which it was a nice conclusion. I was already aware they were going to be tying in Miles with to the Beyond story, so yeah. Still, it was fun to see. It's just the fact that they show up and just like, yeah, you can't call yourself Spider-Man anymore because we own the copyright. It was kind of fun, but yeah, it'll be fun to see Miles and Ben go to meet. Anyway, moving on to our next book, we've got Venom, number 1. Where we left off, Venom, Eddie Brock was the King in Black. He could control every symbiote out there, and they were all out there trying to help when they could. Takes a lot out of them though, and sometimes he's not as there as he'd like to be for Dylan, who has since bonded with the symbiote himself. So this year we got 2 writers, 1 artist, and 2 initially disconnected but eventually connected stories. So it kind of begins with a burning motel, some soldiers outside of it, and Venom attacking them. And it's Dylan Brock. The symbiote tells them they should be running, but Dylan disagrees. He wants revenge. Flashes back to 12 hours previously. Eddie takes over a group of symbiotes in space, dealing with a drifting ship. They get in. Pirates attacked it. He splits them up, but he can just kind of think himself into any of them when needed. Finds the crew, and yeah, they're not exactly happy to see symbiotes because, well, they Null's rampage kind of mess up a lot of planets. It turns out that on Earth, Dylan is having problems getting to fights. Principal wanting to talk to his father, but well, Eddie's not always able to be reached. But when Dylan gets home, someone's watching their apartment. So back in space, Eddie is deals with the space pirates, but it turns out that one of the symbiotes is not what it seems and killed the crew of the freighter. Explaining that it's a warning. It has a warning from the future. That warning being, don't sit too comfortably on the throne, for soon the King in Black's throne will be empty. It's not a threat, it's not a warning, it's a statement of fact. Eddie won't know the day nor the hour, won't see it coming. Say your goodbyes, talk to people you love, tell them to run, tell them to hide. It won't make any difference. And then the not symbiote disintegrates. But back on Earth, Eddie comes and talks to Dylan, basically saying, we gotta tell him to pack, we gotta go. While he's doing this, his phone rings. It's Eddie. And he tells Dylan that the Eddie out there isn't him. Tells him where to go. A motel that Eddie often uses to access the symbiotes. He's thinking about the message he received. And then he becomes unstuck in time and sees all manner of things. A symbiotic creature calling himself Bedlam, Kang. Wakes up. Calls Dylan. Goes to voicemail. Dylan arrives at the motel. And as he does, Eddie runs out realizing that he just led Dylan into a trap, as the motel is attacked by soldiers and apparently blown up. Or at least part of it, including where Eddie was. Dylan venoms out and attacks the soldiers. And but Eddie is now stuck in time and ends up at in some strange garden, a strange alien garden. And arriving there feels like coming home. Gets out of the symbiotic goop he was in and is met by a being called Meridius. Apparently, Eddie is at the furthest end of all that is, in Meridius' garden. We get an epilogue, however. Those in a place, an undisclosed location, the absent throne, an undisclosed location, the remains of Eddie Brock are brought to Meridius. That is where the issue ends. An interesting start to Venom. It should also be noted there are two writers on the series. We've got Al Ewing and Ram V. I think Ram V is writing the stuff with Dylan, while Al Ewing is writing the space stuff. Al Ewing has definitely shown of late to be extremely talented when it comes to Marvel space stuff. But yeah. Anyway, moving on to our last comic for last week. Savage Avengers number 26. Where we left off, Kulan Goth had won. In fact, he even killed Conan when Conan and Kang attempted to stop him. But Conan dies, goes into the final wilderness. Turns out that Conan bought Kang 2 minutes. And now it turns out that Kulan Goth took a bite out of Kang as well, so he's got a little bit of Kang going on. But back where everything began in Savage Land, Kang, Doom, and Strange arrive. They taunt Goth when a dinosaur arrives and attacks Kulan Goth. A dinosaur written by none other than Conan. The quartet take on Kulan Goth, and yeah, 4-on-1. You'd think that wouldn't be good odds for Kulan Goth, but no, it's not good odds for the rest of them. But the rest of the Savage Avengers are brought forth, and there's including the Juggernaut, Daredevil, Elektra, Johnny Blaze, Black Widow, Wolverine, Black Knight, Magic, all of them. And turns out that the dagger that Strange has is the dagger that he basically made a point of soaking in the blood of Shumagorath. But Ghost Rider was riding one of the dinosaurs in the Savage Land and manages to. But yeah, it's no match for Doom. But Magic stabs Kulan Goth, and apparently that was what Kulan Goth was wanting. And so the issue ends with Cooling Goth seeming to be even more powerful than before. And that's going to be... I like that the Cooling Goth, we're finally getting a conclusion on the Cooling Goth story, because a lot of... As much as I do enjoy this series, the Cooling Goth story was... the fact that we're 26 issues in and it's still not over, I feel like a large part of that is just because there were so many issues that felt like we were spinning their wheels. So, but otherwise, solid book, fun as always, fun issue. But anyway, that's it for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal can be found in the description box down below. Should have the roundup for this week's books going up hopefully tomorrow and the next day. Fingers crossed. Hopefully. But this is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying live long and rock hard.